Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Public Works and Finance Regular Commission meeting for today. On the far side, Catherine Bonzo, our new City Councilor, Walter Steed. I'm Art Betke. Representing staff today is Chief David Duke. The first order of business is the selection of our committee chair and vice chair for the next year.
I nominate, I don't know who's where, but I nominate Walter to be chair and Art to be vice chair.
Traditionally, the council president and vice president have handled the chairs of the two committees. We've done it differently before, and I'm certainly not looking for the job, so it might be a matter of whether or not you want it.
I could certainly do it, and I would do it. I'd happily step in too.
Okay.
So let's see. So,
I'll withdraw.
oh, you don't have to. You just have to vote.
You didn't get seconded.
Should we nominate you two just for the sake of completeness?
I don't think so.
So,
You want chair?
I'll vote for me.
Okay, for chair,
Yep.
and then vice chair would be?
You.
Okay. And hopefully we'll both be out of town at different times and not the same times.
If not, then you get to be chairman after all.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay,
Is
good
that
enough.
okay with you? Okay.
Okay, next up is the approval of the January 11th, 2016 minutes.
And I understand there was one modification made earlier today, and that's been incorporated to your satisfaction.
It has.
And if we're good with that, Lori, we will approve them as amended.
I've got it. Yep.
Okay? All right?
I didn't get to it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Minutes
Oh,
are
no.
approved. Next up is professional services contract for the design of 3rd Street reconstruction and utility improvements. Evan Lilly.
Good afternoon. You may have, hopefully you've noticed the condition of the pavement on 3rd Street East.
Hard not to.
Yeah, especially towards the park. What we'd like to do is replace that. It's beyond its useful life, and what we found under it, it was surprising that it's held together as long as it has. So it needs to be fully reconstructed. And while that is happening, we have a 24-inch water line in the water comp plan that is intended to eventually run from downtown to the Vista tank. And we need to get that in pieces. That's a very expensive piece of our main. We'd like to stick that in while we're doing this reconstruction, that portion anyway. And the the sanitary and storm sewer system needs to be upgraded too. So we are proposing to make that a project. We have a contract for the design of that with Redicel that we've negotiated. And our plan is, budgetarily, we can't do the whole stretch from Hayes to Polk. So we want to have the whole thing designed, bid it in 2 parts, and construct what we can, which we're planning to construct from Hayes to Monroe, which would be the park block, which is pretty much the worst section, and of course it's as heavily used as the rest of 3rd Street. So we have an agreement with Redicel. You've had that in your packet. I have to bring to your attention, Councilman Steed noticed that this agreement, which is slightly different from our standard, but has been approved by legal, but there was not a reference to the cost spreadsheet for the design in the actual task order document itself. We've since revised that, and I wanted to make sure you all had a copy that was correct.
Thanks.
It's on page 8 at the top. We just added a reference to Exhibit A, and we're calling the spreadsheet Exhibit A. That first sentence there in that paragraph will correct that. So the agreement was for $75,358, and we'd like to get started on that ASAP for summer construction.
Walter?
They will design it all.
Yes.
They will construct a set of bid docks for the Monroe to Hayes section with an alternate for Polk to Monroe.
Yes.
And depending upon prices, you will award either the base bid or the base bid plus alternate. If the alternate doesn't come into the money, which you don't think it will, under this contract, will Rita-Cell still be obligated to come back and create a second set of bid docks for the alternate and rebid that in 2018, I think it said in the packet?
Not under this contract, no. We would have the plans electronically. We could split that out. It will be split out cost-wise. It'd be a fairly straightforward process to just do that and bid it at that time.
So, if I may.
Yes.
So would the city then bid the second project and not Rita-Cell?
We certainly could.
The current way it's laid out, as I understand it, is Rita-Cell is obligated to handle the contract documents and the bidding process in conjunction with the city. If they bid the first part, the alternate's too expensive, you're going to build the first part, then you've got the alternate part to bid a second time.
Yes.
And you're saying the city would do that probably?
Yes.
Okay, because all the documents would already be created.
Exactly.
Okay.
I understand it.
I've got a couple of questions. Why the year gap between 2016 and 18 if there's two separate projects to be involved?
Yeah, it's a matter of trying to spread our funds where they're most needed. And honestly, I can't recall the project that's going to take up that budget for
But there's
17.
one out there.
So I know we were also hoping to do Lily Street, and so that got put on hold as well. Lily would be from A to 3rd.
Okay, yeah.
You recall we replaced part of that water line. The street is in very bad shape, and we'd like to continue that to 3rd Street. That was a budget issue too. I can let's see, is Les in
It's
here?
no big, it's just oh, good. Les came in when I wasn't looking.
Sorry, Les, I don't recall that. The reason why
we
yeah,
spread it.
Yes.
One of the things to keep in mind is we program certain projects within our capital program for funding, such as in the water capital program. We have a certain amount of miscellaneous water line money that's also in there. In this case, we have money set aside for the 24-inch main, right, that would eventually connect downtown to Vista, as Kevin mentioned earlier. So that allows us enough money to do a segment of this water line work. Then it's a question of, okay, is there enough to go beyond that first piece? And if not, how soon will we accumulate enough? And based on what's currently in the program, I'm not anticipating we'll have enough with the bids this year to do both pieces, and I'm not anticipating that we will have it until 2018.
So the water line is the constraint?
That's really the driver here, is the water line. There's enough probably to do the street work by itself. There's enough to do the sewer work. Water line is the constraint because this, the 24-inch water line is expensive construction, and we don't have a lot there to play with everything else that's going on in the water fund right now.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, be so much nicer just to get it done, minimize disruption, but sometimes just not possible.
Right.
But another question is, what's the nature of the water line on the other side of Hayes? How far, is this the first chunk of 24-inch, or is there already 24-inch on the other side?
There's a portion of 24-inch that runs from Vista, as I recall, back to Mountain View, and then from there into town is where we need to place larger
So,
pipe.
chunk there, and because Third Street's in such bad condition, catch that part, and then interfill
As we
is,
go along, right? Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's it's on the route, and it's in the middle of the route.
yeah.
But while we're there, it makes sense to go ahead and do that work, so we don't have to come back and tear up the street at some future date.
Yeah.
Does this preclude pavement management work this summer? Or is
No,
that
no.
separate?
This would be the budget is there to do this work, but also to then I think we're budgeted to do. We ended up with 150,000 towards chip seal or slurry seal.
Did you want to add anything, Tyler? Okay.
I think Les covered it. That's
I think you took the words out of Tyler's mouth.
Okay.
Anything, Catherine? Okay.
I read it, and I liked that the plan was being offered up to be accepted, and so that we know what the plan is going to be, and I realized that the constraint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was pretty clear, and I like the way that you decided to deal with it.
So
Move it to council on consent.
I think we should. Let's move it, council, for consent agenda, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David?
Entertain a comment from
Very brief comment.
David Hall, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. This obviously isn't the real purple pipe, but I would like to suggest that you consider putting whatever future might need when you're laying the pipe, purple pipe up there would get water from downtown up to East City Park, so reused water might be able to be used there. Also, any fiber optics or anything else that might be good to have stretched out while it's open. Lay it.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Okay, next up, number 4, which is the sanitation lease agreement with Tim Davis. What do you have for us, Tim?
Good afternoon. As you are all aware, we're in the process of implementing the new single-stream curbside recycling program. One of the big changes for the new single-stream program is glass will no longer be accepted at the curb. In anticipation of that, they actually quit accepting glass back in July. We had anticipated beginning before now, but as a result of this change and as a convenience to Moscow residents, the city established a second glass drop-off area and a 20-yard container out at the former Gilbert Auto parking lot at the corner of South Blaine and Highway 8 East. This property is owned by Spence Holdings, LLC. And in your packet, there's a lease agreement with the City of Moscow and Spence that has been prepared that describes the property and the terms of the agreement for council consideration.
Walter?
I warned Tim earlier today I was going to ask this. What kind, you said we quit in July. I thought it was later, but
It was late July.
what are you seeing in terms of glass recycling being taken to this container versus being taken to the recycle center, and versus what we were doing from curbside before we quit taking it at curbside?
I have some total tonnage numbers. They're not necessarily broke out curbside from what's delivered to Moscow Recycling, but we did see a little downward spike that month of August, and I presume that was when we initially quit accepting glass. But it's interesting that
At the curb.
at the curb. But from the months July through December of last year to the same 6 months this year, we've actually taken in more glass this year by about 11 tons.
So that's comparing July to December of 14 versus 15?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The new container, since it's been placed, has only been hauled out and dumped three times. During that same period, the 20-yard containers used down at the recycling center have been dumped 46 times.
I don't know the difference in the two sizes. I mean,
They're both the same size.
they're all the same size?
Yeah. But as a comparison, the material that's accepted down at the recycle center and what was previously, accepted at the recycle center in that same time frame between July and December, that container was dumped 46 times as compared to 3 times with the new container.
Might be part of
Do
people
you
don't
want
know
to
it's
ask the
there.
question I'm fixing to ask?
Go ahead, Walter.
Do we need the Spence container?
I think people don't know it's there
I
yet.
think it's still
Is
fairly.
it that?
Well,
I
there's
think
nothing
it's-
saying dump your glass
It
here.
is.
I think it's new enough that, we might have some better numbers by the end of the year. And again, we can try to publicize that new drop-off area as well further. But
Sign out at the curb would be,
I mean, I don't mind having it if people are going to use it. I mean,
it's kind of out of view from the main thoroughfare there. And it may be that even if we put some signs on the container, some big white lettering with glass drop-off or something of that nature that might catch some folks' eyes, we can certainly,
or put a sandwich board out towards the street frontage a little closer.
yeah.
I don't think until we actually start single streaming people that put their glass in, I think we're going to have that happen for a while. People are going to put their glass in single stream thinking that they can, and not until they realize,
better not.
no, that's just normal stuff. There's a period of time to learn it. And so then they'll begin to notice that they can take their glass. I think it's just going to take a little more time and education. And
Yeah, and I think it's still fairly new enough. And,
Yeah.
in actuality, the program itself doesn't get started till next
Right,
week.
February.
It's interesting your total glass volume is up.
It was to me, too. I knew it was comparable to last year's. I did not think it would be higher than it was last year for that time period, but it is by about 11 tons.
So this agreement is only until July 31 of this year?
Correct.
Then what happens?
It's just renewable on the consent of both parties if we choose to.
Well, now that we're contemplating a lease, you and I have discussed before, what about a platform out there next to the container? Because I've heard from people that hitting the hole in the side for some folks is a little difficult, so can we contemplate, please,
Step?
putting in a step or two to get up there?
I would think
put it in?
that might be something that would be doable. My concern would again be liability, and especially when we get into these winter months when, we have snow and snow removal and those types of issues to deal with. That
Is the container the same design downtown as it is at Spence?
no,
So
it's an open
So the
top.
height is not an issue at
The height
recycle
is
center.
comparable, but it's an open top rather than having the closed-in lid like we have out in Spence. And typically what they do down at the recycle center is they have the smaller containers that the public uses out front, and they dump those into the larger container with a fork truck. So that's the difference.
Oh, okay.
So the ones out at the recycle center are easier just to hit and dump. The other ones, it's the put your roll-on bag in the overhead
Yeah.
compartment.
You
the
kind of
thing,
have a
so-
fine line, too, where you have openings for a container like this. You surely don't want kids out in the area playing or the possibility of them climbing up and falling in and hurting themselves and that type of thing. So
So I have heard from people that putting up some kind of an assistance to get a little more height on the thing would certainly enable them, some of the, on the east side, some of the more elderly people do not have a whole lot of upper body to shove containers of glass up. So I think it's something we should definitely be thinking on.
the handrail, when you put the platform in. And I know you have to keep it covered because you don't want people dumping and all kinds of other things. But is there any place to put information about what the glass is used for? Because I think you get better more people doing things if they understand what's the reason to do it.
You know, I did a fairly lengthy article on the glass and not this last Talking Trash, but the one prior to that, which was about the time we were getting ready to do this. And, you know, we can continue along those lines, but to put so many signs on a container.
No, I just thought
gets
just
to
a
the
simple
point
stencil of like what it's for. I think it just, that's the stuff that people notice.
But in that article, I also stated that the city saves anywhere between 22 and 25 semi-loads from going down to the regional landfill by being able to save this glass locally and use it out on the site.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can promote that as well.
Yeah, I mean, just that phrase on the side of the bin makes a lot of sense, just so you get people talking trash.
You could put it in place of a sign that's already on there. I did not understand that we were going to be leasing space from Spence. I thought Spence donated the space and the location. I don't have a horrible problem with what's proposed since it's retroactive to August 1 and it goes to July 31 of 16. I would vote to approve it, but I would like to have it come back to council before the July 31 expiration date with more information about utilization of it.
Sure.
If you're running, 46-3 in terms of volumes downtown versus at Spence. And then the other thing is there's currently a sign on it that says this space provided courtesy of Spence Hardware. I think that should come off of it. You can put Catherine's idea for an explanation sign about what we're doing with the glass.
I was curious, just in going with what Walter was saying about that space, was that space chosen because you thought it was more visible and easier for people to get to with pulling in and pulling out and
No,
how much it costs?
our idea was just simply location. We had first tried to talk with the folks at East Market or East City Marketplace, and they weren't at all interested. I spoke with Brian Spence. I had found out during that course of time that he had purchased that Gilbert Auto property. And it was suggested that maybe I speak to him because it makes sense to have it near a grocery store because folks, are typically traveling there. But
It logistically works. You've got plenty of room to pull through there. I drove through today just to look at it. There was a semi-truck parked out there loading or unloading stuff out of the Gilbert Auto building. I don't have no idea what it was, but there's still room for me to get around to drive by it. And so it's a lot of open area. It's not cramped. It's, like you say, the problems that some people have with the height of the hole is a little bit problematic. But, yeah, we can work on advertising it some more and seeing if people can use it more. And then we can look at it again, say the first part of July on a lease renewal to see if we think it's worth the money.
So, okay with moving forward on this?
You want it full council?
No, I
Or-
think this could go to consent,
And pull it if there's a problem?
right, as always.
Okay, consent.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
thank you.
Okay, next along is review of the public comments of the Water Conservation Plan. Nicole Baker and Tyler Palmer.
Come play too.
I feel the most caught up to speed on this.
Yeah, you had a pretty recent update, huh?
Yeah. Catherine, you need to pull your mic a little closer. Thank you.
All right, well,
It all sounds good up here.
this is something that I think all of you are pretty intimately familiar with now, and we're very excited to be back for what we hope may be the last time before we implement the conservation plan. So with that, I'm going to let Nicole run through how we got to where we are today and what we're hoping to get out of today.
Great. Thanks, Tyler. So the Water Conservation Plan is an important expansion to the city's conservation program to help with our declining aquifer and the pressure on that declining aquifer. It is a 10-year plan, and the proposed implementation date is for 2016. Got it. All right. So after several in-house drafts, the first public draft was presented to and available to the Sustainable Environment Commission in November of 2014. Since that time, 2 more public drafts were evolved from the comments and suggestions made by the Sustainable Environment Commission. On July 1st of 2015, that public draft 3 was presented to a council workshop. And at that point, the public comment period opened for about a little over a month, ending on August 7th. And finally, from those public comments, our responses to those, we made revisions, and that final draft was completed in December of 2015. In your agenda packet, you will see that original draft that was presented to council, the revisions made to that draft based on, again, our public comments. We had quite a few comments, a lot of good comments, lots of interest, so it took some time to get through those, and we made revisions based on that. So that's in your agenda packet. And again, of course, that final draft created in December of 2015. In addition, you'll see the staff responses to those public comments. Ooh. Well,
Maybe not.
that was not empty when I put it there. So, okay, sorry.
There were numbers that showed up there.
Well, I have it on my thumb drive, but essentially we'll skip that one, and we'll just put it all into 2. So essentially what the other graph showed was the water conservation plan, the incentives and measures that were available. Essentially what the other graph showed was that we had 4 different packages that showed different incentives and measures. And those incentives and measures did look at the sectors for the multifamily, single-family, and commercial customer users. Of course, it was not a comprehensive list. What we did is we chose measures and incentives that were popular and successful in other programs or, other cities. We researched the water conservation plans of other cities and also from public comments. And
Yeah, it's blank.
it's in my purse if you want me to get it. I have my backup. Do you guys want the backup or you want to go with it?
I think we're fine.
Okay.
Was there something particular?
Well, essentially what this was showing was it listed all the different measures that that passed the screening process. But I'm going to give you
It's a graph that you guys have all seen. It was within the plan.
So essentially what it did, it had measures and incentives, and all of those were evaluated for the 4 packages. So package A is the existing conservation measures program, and then package B, C, and D added to that. So those additions were incentives and measures that passed the screening process of the water conservation plan. Essentially that's what the other graph was showing you. So now onto this one. The recommendation as recommended to council in July is for package C. And that package C includes the existing conservation measures plan or program. It adds the incentives and measures of a toilet rebate, a landscape replacement rebate, and a landscape guide booklet. And package C, as well as all the other packages, you can unfortunately see that the water use projections do not meet the PBAC or the Pollution Basin Aquifer goals as stated in the Groundwater Management Plan of 1992. And although it doesn't meet those PBAC goals, additional conservation measures and incentives are important to, again, reduce that pressure on our aquifers. And although conservation is not the only answer, it is certainly part of the solution. The staff recommendation is package C for several reasons, as well as it is supported by the Sustainable Environment Commission. Package C targets 2 of the major water use categories for both indoor and outdoor water use. Toilets being the biggest indoor water user, So 30% or more of our indoor water use is used to flush toilets. During the irrigation season, the city of Moscow can see the pumping rates more than double. So a lawn replacement program could certainly help curb that water use during the irrigation season. In addition, the city has an active Yscape program with existing supporting materials that would help with both the landscape replacement program as well as the landscape guidebook. Currently, with current staff and resources and budget, Package C offers a successful implementation of the conservation program. And of course, as we learn what works and what doesn't, we could certainly add incentives and measures into the future. And that's my brief overview of the conservation plan. And I'm asking for the Public Works Finance Committee to forward this plan to council for consideration of adoption of the plan.
I would just add, echoing what Nicole said, the public comment period is so important for anything that we do, and we really appreciated the very detailed public comments that we got from several individuals in the community. And it did influence sections of the plan, and also not just the sections that we changed with this draft, but also the way that we think toward the future. As Nicole mentioned, we don't view this as a stagnant document. This is something that we've selected for our recommendation, a portion that we think that we can do with our current. We realize there's a big pie, and this is a bite we can take. And then as we see how successful this is, we can then move toward further implementation and look at other alternatives. But very much appreciated those public comments. And are looking forward to the conservation plan going into place.
You had some comment about the public comment and the responses to it. I think that might be pertinent following up on Tyler's comments.
Yeah. Within the appendix that discussed the public comments and all they were in a nifty spreadsheet with revised, noted, things like that. I was just interested in, could you explore a little bit more about what each of those means? Whether revised means it was put in, noted, okay, but, you know.
Sure. Again, to reiterate, we had a lot of interest. We had a lot of good comments. Some of them were comments just stating that they liked what they read or they had other ideas. So those would be something that would be under a noted, that we recognize that and appreciate that comment. Revisions, of course, and edits were made as far as corrections to the document. We had a few of those as well.
There were places where perhaps the language was unclear, or there was something that didn't come across the way that it was intended, and there was requests for clarifications or for edits that way. And so a lot of the revisions were based on that. People saying, "Hey, I don't know if you're saying what you want to say here. This hasn't come across as we think it ought," and so we made several revisions.
So kind of semi-stylistic.
Some of them were stylistic. Some of them were more content-based, but some very helpful comments. And so there were corrections, there were revisions, and so corrections were just small stylistic things that may have been noticed. Revisions were things that we revised based on the comment, and then noted were, as we said, it could be something like, "Hey, I'd love to see this expand beyond and go to this type of thing," or I would like to see this in the future considered. And those were things that we noted and we'll take into consideration as we consider the future of the conservation plan.
So how many people came forward, and was it over a period of time?
There was a little over a month comment period. It was open for a little longer than a month. And do you know what the total number?
July 1st through August 7th. And goodness, I don't have an actual number on how many people, but I have about 42 pages worth of comments or more. So
Great.
It was quite a few.
Nicole, I want to compliment staff on the amount of work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
It's certainly taken a long time.
Yes.
I've spent a lot of time asking when we're going to get this. But I do appreciate the work that's gone into it and creating it. But I've got a couple of detailed questions and a couple of general questions, if I might. On page 13, at the top of the page, it talks about future evaluation and effectiveness. And it says evaluating what works and does not work with the plan and adjusting accordingly for cost-benefit analysis budget constraints and water savings can help to improve its effectiveness. I believe one of y'all may have just said something to the effect of a living document type of comment or something. A specific question I've got is that on table 3-3, you have one particular type of item that doesn't meet your criteria of rejecting a low savings and a high cost. And that is the existing outdoor device giveaway item.
The items that were already a conservation measure, part of the conservation measure program, were considered, and it was described in the document, were considered to be accepted even though they were of high cost. However, that particular program is being reconsidered currently.
Does that not fly in the face of the general statement of we're going to reevaluate and see what works and what doesn't?
It certainly does, and like I said, we had issues come up with that program this summer, so we are reevaluating it, and I have not ordered new stock for those particular conservation measures because of the cost.
Just so people know what we're talking about, this is the hand nozzles on the end of a hose, right?
And more specifically and more expensive are the actual timers for some.
So it included both timers and
yes. So
nozzles?
Yeah, they're both fairly expensive, and so we are reevaluating that particular conservation measure program, and I haven't reordered because of that cost.
So it might be living to the point that it's already changing.
Cute.
Thank you.
But at the time the document was written, and you know, in your defense, Walter, was that we were keeping along with what conservation measures were already working, we were already using for the city. Okay. So, you know, so I guess that answers both sides of that question.
That's up in the air.
It certainly is.
Okay.
Yeah, when the document was generated, those were seen as almost grandfathered into the process, and then, yeah.
Okay, and then I tried to run some numbers, and I won't guarantee you my calculations are correct. And David, you may want to hear this and might have a comment, because I know you did an extensive comment on the plan and went through sustainability a good bit. But in talking to Les today, I got a number from Les that production cost of water in Moscow is $2,929 per million gallons, right at $3,000 a gallon. And I'm looking at Les, and he's not telling me I misread that. And then when I attempt to do the math on your spreadsheet, your table 3A, I come up with much less than that for every one of the packages.
Sure.
Package A, I get $340, B is $962, C is $1,056, and D is $1,249. And I'm not swearing by the numbers, but it's what it seems to be. My point being, if we can spend $1,500 going all the way to package D to save 1 million gallons of water that if we pumped it would cost us $3,000, why not?
You want me to?
I can start with.
Does the question make any sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense.
It makes sense what you're asking. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it certainly makes sense, and you know that is what the numbers indicate. There are a few things that I would give as a caveat, that just items to consider. One is there are certain costs that are just inherent in running the utility that we won't see a direct diminishing of costs. For example, you know, like we have to have a certain number of staff just to run the booster stations and the pumps and the distribution system, and there's certain costs due to the size of our system and the miles of distribution pipe and the infrastructure that are inherent in just the size of the thing, not necessarily directly correlated to the amount of water that goes through. And so there's a little bit of a diminishing return when we look at that, when we look at it from that angle. And then, you know, another consideration, while Package D does save water, for example, and at a cost less than what the production cost is, we're looking at what we can implement with current staffing levels as well, what we think we can do. You know, if this program's implemented and it's wildly successful, Package C, we're not sure we can even handle that with our current staffing levels. And so then we're looking at additional expenses because we're having to bring on additional people to help process these requests for these for the conservation plan, which if it is really popular and successful, that's all the better. We're ecstatic about that and would love to have that be a problem. But that is
So
one
the
of the
numbers in here, just to interrupt you, take into consideration Nicole's salary and benefits and office space, et cetera, plus some other smaller elements, I presume, within the current staffing.
Nicole can probably answer that.
And to go to D, those numbers would have to increase because you just can't do it all? Is that what I'm
Well,
hearing?
currently, the numbers that you're looking at are for just a straight comparison of actual costs that are direct costs. So the cost of giving you a toilet rebate, the cost of giving you a shower head. It's not including the cost of labor. It's not including the cost of advertising or public outreach for these particular programs. So that is just so you can compare apples to apples. This is what it would cost to add a toilet rebate versus not having that. So those hidden costs are not included.
And I think that's where a little bit of the disconnect is that when the number that was used for your calculation, Walter, which is the overall water budget for the city of Moscow, takes into account all of those soft
The
costs.
29?
Yeah, the soft costs are all included within that number, whereas the numbers that were included in the conservation plan are just the hard costs directly related to the device.
Okay.
In addition to that, I'll add, it also does not include, it was mentioned at the workshop, but it doesn't include the potential savings on the wastewater treatment plant side and the savings for chemicals, energy, for not producing that particular amount of water and dispersing it into the system. To reiterate more of what Tyler was saying, it just, I do have those numbers for what if we don't pump this amount of water, and how much can we save for not treating that water and using the electricity to pump it.
I asked exactly what you were asking, and I got to have them all one-on-one, and it was great. And what I really appreciated, because I was like, well, yeah, Plan D, man, let's go, And then they said, hold on, we have so much
Yes,
more.
but?
Well, no, it was laid out on how much more we have to do, and to be effective. They want to have a successful implementation. That's the goal. You have to be successful so that you can do more.
And I think that really hits it on the head. What we're really striving for is taking a piece of this, taking a bite. We realize that the conservation, our water problem is a big pie, and we want to take a bite that we can chew and we can swallow in order to have it be successful. A program on paper is no good. It's the program that we implement is what matters, and we believe that Package C is an implementable portion of this program that we can get off the ground with a good public response, and that we can effectively manage, and then it can be a jumping off point to a lot of different things that we'd like to try.
So is there any thought as to how long to, for example, wear and use the recommendation C that is recommended in the plan before reconsidering it and perhaps moving on to D? Is there a growing in period after which time it would be comfortable to implement D?
I think a lot of that will depend on the public response to the plan. We really we don't know exactly how the public's going to respond and at what velocity it could take off, and so a lot of that could depend on the public response and then the analysis of what's working and what might not be working as well. It's hard to say. I mean, it's something we will continually look at.
Because I can see the whole plan and finance being somewhat stressed if a lot of people jump onto the toilet rebate right now. And then we've got a problem of too much success right out the gate, and trying to implement other programs would become difficult beyond that. So perhaps a phased-in approach, but when I was looking at the incremental savings from Plan C to D versus A to B and things like that, it's kind of like, why wouldn't we go with D? Because it really makes sense, but in terms of overloading too soon and watching the whole water conservation plan crater because of too much popularity, a victim of its own success, maybe. But for just accepting the plan, I don't think we're committing council necessarily to any of the options right off. So,
Well, I think we are, because accepting the plan,
Who's accepting C?
accepting a certain laundry list or a menu of options, right?
Right, the staff recommendation of
But-
package C, yes.
I'm not seeing the staff option as being so, fundamental to the rest of the document that it can't be changed.
I had some questions, I think, since we had spoken, if that's okay for me to ask the bigger picture. So when you were talking about implementation, and we know that people are going to replace their toilets, are you also going to toilet's not difficult to replace, but do people need to come pick it up? I guess I began to think about the logistics of getting the toilets to the public. Because once people hear a 30% decrease, they're going to want to do it. So then how...
Within this plan, the city doesn't, it's a reimbursement program.
Right.
And so we don't actually
I know.
ever process the toilets ourselves. But we've had lengthy discussions about how to best implement this, having cooperation with our local plumbers,
Yeah.
with our local stores that sell the toilets, and trying to really help them become champions of the program, so that they know that it's there. So when somebody goes in to buy a hardware device, we've got a flyer there from the program saying, okay, here's how you do it, and here's how you do it. So they'll be submitting the information to us to process, but that is something we always consider is, what about the person who just doesn't know anything about plumbing and sees this and says, I would like to participate in that, and we want to make sure that we have information readily available on the city's website, on social media, that says, here are some steps you can take, here's some contact information, so that we can get you
So
guided
that
in the
means
right
you've already
direction.
contacted all of, I guess I was just wondering, will all distributors take the...
Well, there's a lot of things to consider for the
Debate.
implementation phase, and that's the next big step. So once this is approved, that's where all the effort for this plan will be.
The distributor themselves won't be taking a rebate.
Well, I thought that's how you had to do the exchange. Or are you doing it with the city?
No, well,
The city's-
currently, what I foresee is something similar to what other communities do, where there's a site inspection that, yes, you in fact have a inefficient toilet, and that gets switched out, whether they do it themselves or hire a plumber. That's certainly up to the homeowner. And then there's another site inspection to say, yes, this in fact happened, and therefore you do qualify for a rebate. So that's what I foresee as that's usually that's a popular way to go about it in communities. In bigger communities, you do hear of, okay, here's now
Yeah.
a time to switch out your toilet, and you do work directly with a manufacturer. That typically happens in a lot larger areas than Moscow.
So I've got a 1992 toilet, and I hear about this program, and I want to change it out and get the rebate. So I contact the city comes and inspects and says, yes, you do, you have a 1974 toilet. It's very inefficient. If you want to change it out, then you need to contact a plumber or Uncle Fred or whoever can legally do it, and then bring this city notice that it's been done, come inspect it, and present us with the bill or the cost, or does that just get you a check? And my question then becomes, when I first started looking at this, what would I be thinking in terms of it's going to cost me, and how much is the city going to give me to rebate me for part of that?
Sure. Again, those are details for the implementation that I would have to.
But you had to have numbers for the rebates to crank
Sure,
these.
sure, yeah. The numbers I have for instance, in your situation, if you had a pre-1992 toilet and you wanted to switch it out to a plumbing code toilet, that would be a $50 rebate. However, if you wanted to do a high-efficiency toilet, that would be a $125 rebate.
And those two toilets would cost me what? If I called up Acme
Sure.
Plumbing and said, come give me an estimate on these two different toilets, what are they going to be telling me?
The plumbing code toilet, you can find, Costco had them for $88.
Installed?
Not installed, just for the fixture. And then for the high efficiency toilet, you can spend up to like $350 on a toilet if you want, not installed. So the price range does vary in the market as far as if you're getting name brand or more of a generic brand, if you want the high efficiency dual flush versus a single flush toilet.
Okay.
So, here we have review public comments received and proposed revisions to the draft plan as prepared by staff, forward to City Council for consideration of adoption, or provide staff further direction. So here we are today to forward the plan to City Council, and that's our action list.
Full council.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. You've been part and parcel of this.
Come over to the table here, David.
Very quick, I had one and then two things that came up with your discussion. David Hall, again, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. One comment on comment number 17. It's not one of mine. It's on page 370 if you want to look at your document. But
If
it's
you want to
brief.
impress
I can
everybody,
read it.
you can say what page number that's on and give everybody some idea of the size of this packet
It
today.
looks to be page 370.
Page 370 in your comments there. It's short. I know who sent it, but I won't state in the record. What will be the fallout or proactive policy change if it's likely that Moscow will be out of compliance with the PBAC water management agreement? That's the part I was interested in. The answer is noted. The PBAC water management agreement is voluntary. And my comment is we have to consider the state agencies that are behind PBAC, Idaho Department of Water Resources, and the Washington Department of Ecology are the folks who are saying that we're mining the aquifer and it'll be there.
No, they have not said we're mining the aquifer. To my best knowledge,
I don't think they've used those words.
They've never gone there.
But their comments back are that the entities have not, from the entity's recent updates to the plan, I don't remember the exact wording, that they were both worried that we had not stemmed the drawdown on the Grand Ronde aquifer. So at some point they're going to give you leeway forever.
Yeah,
So-
if I may.
Please.
As the city council's PBAC rep, and I'm looking at Les to correct me if I go wrong, they've never said we're mining it. They are very interested in what is occurring with it, the fact that it is dropping, the data that PBAC generates and acquires to show what is exactly happening with it. This is why the city of Moscow, through the staff and now through the council, are looking at additional conservation measures. We all understand that we cannot conserve our way out of the dropping of the Grand Ronde. We know that. But I believe in listening to both Washington Ecology and to IDWR, Department of Water Resources in Idaho, that they are very aware of what PBAC and the city of Moscow, Pullman, et cetera, are doing, and they went so far as to provide an additional $100,000 to a PBAC a couple of months ago to do further studies on alternate water sources. So you're correct. They're totally plugged into what they attend the meetings, as you know,
Right.
and plugged into it. But I have not heard of any stick that's tied to the management agreement in terms of if you don't achieve it, we're going to do this, that, or the other to you. They want us to continue as individual entities across a state line to do our best efforts to try to get there. But what Nicole and Tyler have proposed today will not get us there. We know that. The document even says that.
Right.
But we think it's the right thing to do and the right way to go. And regardless of Tyler's explanation of why going all the way to D, E, F, and G isn't practical, we are perfectly willing, I believe, at least these 3 out of 6, perfectly willing to move this forward with consideration for approval of Plan C.
Okay.
Which may not limit us to Plan C by the time council gets done with it.
I agree
And
that
I,
they
and I,
have
wa-
not
and
used
I,
that.
I want to, and I know you may have something else, but I want to thank you for coming forward with a question out of the
Public comments.
public comment, because I have one that I just realized I hadn't asked. So I'm gonna, once you get through, I want to go
yeah.
back and ask mine.
Okay.
I have two very brief things that came up, if I may. I remember last year, I think it was you, Walter, and I don't remember what the plan was, but you said the city council can accept the plan. That doesn't mean you will follow it to the letter. It was a different plan. People had some consideration or some concerns. I don't remember what plan. Anyway, just because you accept the plan doesn't mean, I believe, that you have to. The council can still decide how to implement it. I think.
If I may, and I disagreed with Art a moment ago on that topic. I don't know what you're referring to as
Can't remember
previously,
which
but
plan,
but my understanding is the proposal for this plan, recommendation from staff, is to adopt what they call Package C, and Package C has very specific dues built into it, such as toilet rebates and the other things that Nicole has mentioned, while at the same time saying that it's something of a living document and plan, and if they look at it and decide that the outdoor devices
Yeah.
is not cost-effective or worth the amount of savings that we get in gallons for the amount of dollars we're putting in it, that they would certainly look at taking that out of the program. I presume that means that if you come along with some new invention somewhere of some gimmicky thing that'll save a lot of water, they might walk in here and want to add it to the program.
I think it doesn't also
Certainly.
preclude the council from adopting Plan D either.
That's true. And we haven't adopted anything yet.
That's right.
Right, so couldn't council come and say, okay, we've decided we want to add this one? I mean, it's, you could initiate the changes too, I would think.
Yes, I think
guess
so.
that's my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I agree.
Sort of clumsy because I couldn't. The final thing, for the savings cost of the wastewater, I thought about trying to calculate that out, but then you'd have to also figure out how much of the water is actually treated and how much is watering the lawn and cars, and you have to pull that part out. So that cost calculation would be even more difficult than the production side.
I couldn't even get through the
So-
water side, much less
Yeah,
trying to
so
figure the
I started that,
wastewater side.
that's, and it wasn't going to be added, but that was all I had.
Okay, thank you.
Questions.
Appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Nicole and
You were gonna make
and
one more.
I have one thing in the public comment that I caught my attention.
Where are we?
I'm in number 53. The last sentence in 53 on page, just to impress everybody, 376 of the 409-page packet. If the cemetery well is still functional, perhaps that well could be used and piped to the ball fields. I'm sure they mean the ball fields on Joseph. What is the status of the cemetery well? Is that the one that has sand problems?
Yes.
You've worked on it. I don't remember the exact current status. And
There were extensive sand problems. It hasn't been functioning since I've worked for the city. There were extensive sand problems. They had it sand in. Les can certainly give a more
Les-
comprehensive history than I can on
I
this
think
one.
Les has dealt with the cemetery well. We own a well that's located near the cemetery. It's the city's well, not the cemetery's well.
Two of them, actually.
We
yes.
own two of them, okay.
Yes, we do.
They have produced in the past.
Yes, they
They're
have.
currently offline,
That's correct.
and you've done some work on them in the past 5 or 6 years to try to find out if they could be usable again?
That's all correct. So good summary. Anything else? No.
Use them and pipe them and use them with the cost of doing it to irrigate Joseph Street.
Well, when the cemetery wells go back online, they will be tied directly to the distribution system, like all the other wells. So we don't distinguish and say this well is going to go serve just this part of town. It's just part of the entire network. It's part of the potable water system, so it would just go into the
They're
distribution. like the
Wanapum
other
wells.
They are
Upper aquifer.
upper aquifer, perhaps Wanapum, perhaps something else wells. Yes. They're a little bit in between, kind of a hybrid.
And you sound like they could go back online at some point?
That is still our intent, yes. Yes.
we have we've got estimates on some geophysical work right now that we're trying to get put together that we would be bringing forward to look at that very thing and try and figure out if we can find a
Carry those forward.
way to carry those forward.
But dedicating them to the ball fields would not be
There's no
Possible
reason to
or
do
what?
so because, I mean, all you would be doing is piping potable water and a separate pipe system to the ball field versus using the existing pipe system that's already there.
None of our wells have a specific purpose. All of our wells just go into the distribution system. The system's intertied, and so you'd end up with just a redundant pipe system piping the same potable water that would otherwise be in the system.
no gain.
Right.
Yeah, we would just use the existing system.
So there.
Very good.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Okay. Shall we move on and forward this to full council for discussion and consideration?
Yeah, works for me.
I was just going to say, too, you can tell we're already thinking about implementation. So any other examples would be helpful, I think, for the rest of
All right.
explanation for the rest of the council.
Great.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, just forward to council without a recommendation of adopting C.
I would go so far as to recommend adoption
Adaptation.
without a specific package.
Okay,
Yeah.
just to clarify that.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's good to have discussions.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you. We'll see you guys next week.
We've run out of agenda, so at this time, we'll consider ourselves adjourned.
Thank you.